Most developed nations record successes in view of their effective and efficient intermodal transport system.
And at the moment, available statistics shows that the entire transport sector contributes little to Nigeria's gross domestic product, unlike in other developed climes where the sector drives their economy.
And as part of efforts to change the narrative and standardize the nation's transport sector, the National Assembly initiated the National Transport Commission Bill.
And the bill, which has been undergoing legislative processes for 10 years, now was finally passed, awaiting presidential assent.
And again, the bill, when assented to, is expected to create a multi-modal transport system that will drive the nation's transport policy and facilitate a speedy economic development.
So what gap did the National Transport Commission Bill intends to address in the transport sector? What positive revolution would be expected in the transport industry with the coming on board of this piece of legislation? How would this drive socio-economic development of Nigeria to make the sector contribute significantly to the nation's gross domestic product? These are some of the issues we intend to interrogate as we discuss the National Transport Commission Bill 2020. This is Good Morning Nigeria, the second for the week. I am Jumbo Yusuf. You're welcome.
And I am Kirian Umayo, joining Jumai to also welcome you to this particular edition of Good Morning Nigeria and the network service of the NTA. We are live from our studios here in the capital city of Abuja, and we'll be bringing you, as usual, news and also serve you complimentary segments in the course of the program. First of all, let's get Ifama Ojinda to give us the Good Morning News. Hello, Ifama.
Hello, Kirian. Good morning, Jume. Here is the morning news. The federal government has assured Nigerians that the desired security and stability will be restored to the northeast and other parts of the country bedeviled by acts of crime and criminality. This followed the adoption of new strategies as well as the acquisition of state-of-the-art military hardware towards reinvigorating the fight against terrorists and other criminal elements undermining national security. This was at a crucial meeting with the Northeast Governors Forum held in the State House, Abuja.
The general report I'm getting, other than the conventional one from the intelligence sources, is that the army should do better. And this is the truth. I assure you, Northeast governors, especially the governor of Borno, that we go to bed and we wake up thinking about you and how to secure our country.
Meanwhile, President Muhammadu Buhari has signed instruments of accession of the agreement for the establishment of the African Trade Insurance Agency. The agreement and the agency, which are registered with the Secretariat of the United Nations, is in line with the organization's charter. Minister of State's Petroleum Resources, Timipre Silva, has officially inaugurated the Nigerian Gas Transportation Network Code. The code is to optimize gas availability and delivery in the country in line with the federal government's promise to add value to gas and make it available to Nigerians.
The aggregate impact of our three anchor program on gas, namely the Nigerian Gas Transportation Network Code, the National Gas Expansion Program, and the Nigerian Gas Flare Commercialization Program, will help us achieve the presidential mandate of gas penetration, gas-based industrialization, and economic diversification.
The National Population Commission has launched the automation of birth registration and digitization of civil registration and vital statistics. The launch commemorates the 2020 Africa Civil Registration and Vital Statistics Day.
By the projection that we have done, mid-year 2020, we are 206.3 million persons in Nigeria. And from our own projection, we are now growing at an average annual rate of 2.55%.
Today's commemoration is a large legacy of the vision of the first conference of African ministers responsible for civil registration.
And on to issues of COVID-19, Nigeria is yet to reach the peak of the COVID-19 pandemic, and the recent decline in confirmed cases should not be used as excuse for irresponsible behavior and actions. Chairman of the Presidential Task Force on COVID-19, Boss Mustafa, gave this warning at Monday's briefing in Abuja.
I believe that if we ramp up the tests, if the subnationals deploy resources, deploy manpower, collect samples, search, detect, test, and take into isolation and provide care, we will see much bigger figures.
Our focus is still to reduce fatality to less than 1%, not only with preventive measures, but also with a strategy that encourages citizens to report early for treatment.
Meanwhile, the NCDC has confirmed 290 new cases of COVID-19 in Nigeria. The new cases recorded from 16 states indicates that Lagos and Plateau states have the highest number of new infections with 82 new cases each, followed by Oyo with 19. Next is the FCT with 18 cases. Edo has 16, Kaduna 15, while Enugu and Ogun states have 9 new cases each. Others are Kano and Kwara with 8 cases each. Cross River, Ondo and River states have 5 new cases each. Ekiti has 4, Imo 3, while Borno has 2 new cases. Nigeria now has 46,867 confirmed cases, out of which 33,346 have been successfully treated and discharged, while 950 unfortunately died of the virus. Now to other news. As part of its economic empowerment drive, the Future Assured initiative of the First Lady of Nigeria, Aisha Buhari, has reached out to farmers in Jigawa State. The initiative distributed 70 water pumping machines to farmers to boost their agricultural production.
This COVID, we have been trying to cushion the effects of the lockdown. So Future Assured is an all-rounder.
The Joint Admissions and Matriculation Board, JAMB, says post-Unified Tertiary Matriculation Examination, post-UTME screening for the 2020 admission processes will now begin not earlier than 7 September 2020 in universities and polytechnics and colleges of education in the country. The board said the shift in date of the admission process from the earlier announced 21st August is to accommodate candidates who will be taking part in this year's School-Based Senior School Certificate Examination, SSCE. JAMB Registrar Professor Isiaq Oloyede made this known after a consultative virtual meeting with Vice Chancellors, Rectors and Provosts of tertiary institutions. Professor Oloyede said, as the custodian of higher sector of the education system, JAMB wants to avoid students running from one state to the other for post-UTME examination after NECO and other exams. The JAMB boss said institutions whose post-UTME screening is mandatory for candidates would have to spread such exercise in 2 phases. He also revealed that the board has withheld results of candidates that sat for this year's UTME at correctional service centers over suspected infractions. And that's the morning news. The program continues with Jumai and...
The program is Good Morning Nigeria, and it's now time for us to bring you newspaper review.
And our newspaper reviewer, Bayo Toby, is in the studio. Good morning, Bayo.
Thank you, Juma. Good morning. Good morning, Kirian.
Yeah, Bayo, good to see you.
Good morning, Nigeria. Thank you.
Yeah, Tuesday morning.
Yes.
And we have about 3 newspapers to review this morning, or 2 to review, plus, of course, the editorial. Okay, let's begin with the Punch newspaper. Punch newspaper above the nameplate. Sage attacks Salami panel, false suspect testimonies against Magu. That's on page 9. Oil marketing firms' revenues plunged by 204.52 billion naira. That's on page 19. COVID-19 guidelines violation. PTF blames governors for crowds at Edo rallies and the Kashamu's burial ceremony. It's on page 2. Now, on the right-hand side of the Punch newspaper, that's of course very close to the nameplate. Say, post-UTME tests begin September 7, says JAMB. It's on page 11. And then deregistration ruling. INEC confused on judgment held for Supreme Court, perhaps for clarifications. It's on page 7. Now, the lead story this morning on the Punch newspaper is resettling displaced residents will stop Boko Haram's recruitment. That's according to the Northeast governors. That's on page 8. He has 3 riders. Government doesn't appreciate gravity of impending famine, says a coalition. Army should do better. That is the truth, says Buhari. Governors seek more equipment for police. All that on page 8. Now, below the photo story there, we have these are some suspected bandits, criminals who were arrested by Operation Safe Haven in Kefanchan, southern part of Kaduna. And then bandits kidnap Zamfara ex-councillor, 5 others, demand 60 million naira. That's on page 9. Kano Sharia Court sentences man to death for blasphemy. It's on page 11. Bauchi Labour exchange words on unpaid workers' salaries. Details on page 9. Then gunmen kill 13 in fresh Benue community attack. It's on page 8. Boy tied up for 2 years by father and stepmothers. That's also on page 8. PDP asks Bojabia Mila to declare Dogara's seat vacant. That's on page 7. Jumai.
Yeah, next is the Daily Trust newspaper, and just below the masthead, how Kano singer back death sentence for blasphemy. Kieran read it in the Audio newspaper, and they find the story on page 4. Nigeria yet to reach COVID-19 peak despite 945 deaths. That story is on page 6. Fantami commissions 11 more ICT projects today. You find that story on page 16. And then the bold headlines there. Boko Haram kills 223 civilians, 86 security agents in 7 months, 89 security agents in 7 months. With riders, insurgents recruiting more members, Northeast governors tell Buhari. You have to do better. President Buhari warns security chiefs again. Provide adequate security. That's coming from the Sultan Khan. They are urging the federal government. And the picture story you see there, the Northeast governors visiting the president yesterday to update him on the security situation in the Northeast. At the bottom plate of the Daily Trust newspaper, 13 killed in Benue chieftaincy tussle. That story is on page 10. Bandits disguised as women abduct 2 in Katsina town. You find that story on page 8. Defection rocks ZLP as Ondo deputy governor joins party. That story is on page 28. Bio.
Well, let's start with the latest development following the Northeast Governors Forum, the visit to Mr. President. They reiterated just after their meeting in Maiduguri that the causes of the crisis is that people from the area, if they get access back to their home, they will be able to engage in their farm activities, and therefore it will limit their idleness and becoming pawns that are recruited into insurgency. They also emphasize of the need to empower the police. And you recall, during the tenure of Inspector General of Police, Sunday Adewisi, the police was strongly enforced. They had armored personnel carriers all over. Immediately there was a change of government that overthrew the administration of President Shehu Shagari. The armed forces seized it, that the police did not need such sophisticated equipment. So each time we talk about security and empowering, we take 1 step forward and sometimes we take 2 steps backwards. Yeah. If we had continued at that time, the police would have been seriously empowered to tackle some of the challenges they have. But the governors are emphasizing seriously that there is need to use the police to supplement the efforts of the military. Don't forget, internal security is primarily the responsibility of the police.
Just to recall also, as you rightly pointed out, during that era when the police were better equipped, recall the Metasine uprising.
Yes.
Then that was quelled by the police.
Yes.
The military did not come into that.
Bulukutu,
So it's a good thing. You have to recall that. That period of time when police was adequately equipped. But I also know that the current administration has also been talking about equipping the police. But I don't know how far the government has gone doing that, because the issue of Boko Haram actually, showed that the police requires adequate equipment to be able to cope with internal security. And now again we have banditry that was added to the Boko Haram insurgency. So it's more or less becoming much more difficult, for the police to cope with, alone, as a force. Which of course is the reason why the military has also stepped in.
You recall that of recent, the police reinforced their team to tackle banditry in the Northwest. You recall, unfortunately, while a team were going, they were involved in accident, and some of them unfortunately died. This is part of the initiative to increase the police presence as far as internal security is concerned.
And
talking about internal security.
Yeah, twice in Borno, they after an attack, the police, the SARS that came on the way went into the bush and, rescued some of the soldiers from the Boko Haram terrorists. And I think that is a good move and an indication that they can do better if they are well equipped.
Yes. Operation Safe Haven has arrested some bandits in southern Kaduna. You recall that there has been persistent killing in southern Kaduna of recent. So much so that even over the weekend, simultaneously there were demonstrations in Kaduna, Lagos and Abuja. And sadly, they were calling for self-determination for the southern part of Kaduna. They wanted that created as a separate state. This points to the fact that there are other nuances involved in that crisis there. Now that these people have been arrested, I think they should be able to follow through investigation to get the root causes of those who are behind it. But if you look at the parade of the persons there, you see that they are young people, most of who belong to some of these youth militia groups that constitute the killing squad in those areas.
Supported by shadow sponsors, actually.
The southern Kaduna crisis has become perennial. It's been there for decades now. But what has happened lately is the fact that the frequent attacks, lately has become a very questionable, action. And again, one would also say, look, what is the duty of the security agents in those areas? Have they not been deployed to monitor the areas in question? Because historically speaking, we know the areas that are usually affected. These are communities. These are communities. People have lived there for over 100 years now.
And they know each other.
They know each other. So, I mean, what's the stop? I'm not saying that no effort is being made, but we're just, discussing on the possibilities of ensuring that they stop these frequent attacks, killing people, children, women, pregnant women, and what have you. That does not say anything good, about security, in Nigeria, because that southern Kaduna has become really a very serious matter.
Security is concerned. The area of COVID-19, the PTF has raised alarm again. At areas of campaign, protocols have been ignored. And we need to tackle that if we are to readdress and secure bending the curve as far as COVID-19 is concerned. As of today, yesterday we had 290 new cases, and these are in 16 states of the Federation. If you look at the highest cases, Lagos and Plateau had the highest, and they had just 82 compared to the hundreds that we have had all the days. Aside from these two, the others all had less than 14. And which means that we are beginning to achieve some positive results, but there's need to continue that considerably so that if the protocols are observed, we'll be able to push it down. The JAMB also has come out with clear dates now for the UTME exams, and they have specifically spread it that students will have to sit for their school certificate examination, NECO and NAPTEC, and they will not have to be traveling up and down across the country. So JAMB has given a specific date, and they want the examinations to be held within the time fixed after September 7th. WAEC is supposed to be between August 17th and September 7th. NAPTEP is between September 21st and October 15, while NECO is between November 5 and November 18. So it's been fixed in such a way that students will not have to, you are a student in Sokoto and you are going to sit for UTME in Calabar, then you have to travel across the country. They've been able to sort that one out.
Now let's talk about that young boy that was discovered in Benin Kebbi.
Yes, a stepmother and a father is very disturbing. They starved the boy so much, but the good thing is that Kebbi State government has stepped in. They are taking over this case. The boy will be looked after, but they are going to also investigate to get to the roots. It's not only in Kebbi. There's another instance like that of a small girl somewhere in Kano. I think, is it Kano or Katsina? That too also has been taken up by the social welfare.
Boy tied up for 2 years. So how's
eating animal sheets,
dung
and all that, tied for 2 years. 2 years.
That is serious.
And she said the boy is mad. Just 2 days in the hospital, the boy is okay. Even smiling and sitting down on the hospital bed. Man's inhumanity to man.
It's incredible. You recall that there was a governor of Bauchi State announced an appointment of a special assistant for the unmarried women. He says that was an error. They have corrected it now. It's a special assistant that is meant for divorcees and widows.
But is it not the same?
No, it's not the same. The governor says that from during campaign, they noticed that there were a preponderance of divorcees and widows, and there's need to take care of them. So it was an error of the mind to have designated it as a special assistant
for single
unmarried women.
So during the campaign, he discovered that a good number of supporters.
There's a large number of widows
and divorcees.
And there is, before it becomes a social problem.
I think the action is humanitarian to some extent, if you ask me.
Yes, let's now go to the editorials from the Daily Sun newspaper, and we're talking about stemming the hepatitis scourge. I'm just going to read a little out of it. The revelation by the World Health Organization that 300 people lose their lives daily from liver cancer and other complications related to hepatitis B and C infections in Africa is frightening.
Well, you see, there's World Hepatitis Day, and the World Health Organization is using the occasion to draw attention to hepatitis. Hepatitis can kill, and it kills as many as about 325 million people. 325 million are infected around the world. And they say on a daily basis, at least about 300 persons are killed by hepatitis B. And it is, in fact, more deadly than some of the diseases that are currently with us, like HIV, like the current coronavirus that is on. But most often than not, people live with a series of hepatitis. There is the hepatitis A, B, C, D, and E. But the good thing is that at infancy, children are given vaccination against it. But it is transmitted through body fluids. And if you could have it and you will not know. So persons are advised to go for periodic checks to determine it. If it is detected early, it can be cured. However, if it is left, it affects the liver and can be very deadly. So what will happen on is that there should be campaign for awareness so that all of us will be aware of it, and we should go make it a duty to do periodic tests for
most carriers
hepatitis.
Don't know their status,
most people don't know, and you could be carrying it and you may not know.
And it's more infectious than HIV, especially hepatitis B.
Yes.
All right, Bayo, it's been nice listening to you this morning.
Thank you.
And the analytical aspect of National Dailies for today. We'd like to thank you and hope you're going to be back again tomorrow.
Tomorrow we are God willing.
For another edition of Newspaper Review as part of the components of Good Morning Nigeria. Well, Bayo, see you again tomorrow.
Tomorrow we are another day.
All right, you're still watching Good Morning Nigeria and on the network service of the NTA. When we come back from this break, we'll be dealing with the topic for today, which has to do with, of course, the transport bill, which has now been passed by the two chambers of the National Assembly. For the past 10 years, the National Transport Commission bill has been undergoing legislative processes until July this year, when the legislation is believed to have satisfied the requirements for presidential assent. Abdul Malik Adio put together this background report to start our conversation.
In late 2018, President Muhammadu Buhari declined assent to the National Transport Commission bill, which the Senate had passed in March 2018. The president cited the need to review certain fiscal provisions set out in the bill, as well as concerns over the duplication of functions which already fell within the statutory mandate of the Nigerian Maritime Administration and Safety Agency, NIMASA, and the Nigerian Port Authority, NTA. Fast forward to July 2020, the Senate passed the Conference Committee report on the National Transport Commission bill and formally reapproved it after having examined the bill in view of the President's observation. The NTC bill seeks to establish the National Transport Commission as an economic regulator of all activities undertaken in the Nigerian transport sector. The National Transport Commission, which is set to replace the Nigerian Shippers Council, would operate as an independent regulator to promote multimodal transport and boost private sector participation in the provision of transport service. Among other things, the National Transport Commission will be responsible for creating equitable access to transport facilities, services, channels, and routes while having recourse to the level of competition and regulating the tariffs, rate, and charges paid by transport service users. Conduct and ensure that the misuse of monopoly or non-transitory market power is prevented in the provision of transport services. It will also promote private sector participation in the provision of transport services and efficiency of the regulated transport industry and monitor performance of the regulated sector. Experts say the new bill is all-encompassing as it takes into consideration all regulated services and related transport facilities, including ports, inland waterways, and all forms of land transport, including rail and road transports in Nigeria and within Nigerian waters. It is hoped that the recently reapproved bill, which was first sponsored in 2008, will shortly receive presidential assent and finally become operational.
And joining us in the studio is Nana Ude. He is a facilitator, Infrastructure Policy Commission, Nigeria Economic Summit Group, and he's also Senior Fellow Legislative Reform Strategy. You're welcome to Good Morning Nigeria.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
And we also have in the studio Mani Ochoboju, a lawyer and transport consultant, as usual. It's a pleasure to have you join us.
Thank you very much.
Right again.
Good morning,
Thank you. Good morning.
All right, and joining us from Ibadan is Senator Abdul Fattah Buhari. He's actually the sponsor of the bill and chairman Senate Committee on Transport. It's a pleasure to have you join us this morning.
Thank you. Good morning.
Jimmy.
Yes, I think somebody from via Zoom.
Yeah, the Zoom is not ready yet. We're going to be joining Bello Haliru very soon. He's of the Shippers Council of Nigeria. Shippers Council of Nigeria will be joining him very shortly. We're still to get the connections right from here to Lagos so that we can also link him up for this conversation. But for now, let's stay with the sponsor of the bill. Yes,
the sponsor of the bill, Senator Abdul Fattah Buhari. I'm coming to you now. And, you know, this bill has just been signed into law. It took a long time for this to happen. So the question is, why does this country need a National Transportation Commission bill? And what is it meant to achieve? Just tell us a little bit about it.
Like you said, this bill has gone through a lot of processes. And then if you look at the whole world, every other economy is moving away from oil. And we decided at the Senate that, look, let's take a precautionary measure. Since the 8th Assembly, the President will have signed into the law by he observed 3 things, which I will come to that later. But if you look at Singapore and South Korea, transport sector, their transport commission and ICT were the only thing that is bringing in revenue to them. In fact, over 47% of their GDP is from the transport section, these two countries. Take, for example, South Korea. They have nothing apart from ICT and transportation sector, and they have the best refinery in the world. Take again Singapore. Arguably, they have the best transport system in the world, and it's yielding a lot of money. Now come to Nigeria. With our population, if we are able to have the commission, all these things we are saying, each department, NIMASA, railway, aviation, they have it in their department, but their contribution to the national economy is very, very insignificant. When we now got a consultant, we were able to realize that, look, if we harness this together and have a commission, the amount they will be contributing to the nation will be higher. In fact, it's between 15%. And that will give us a lot of mileage the way the oil is nosediving in the country today. So we need something solid to boost our economy. That's one of the reasons why we decided at the Senate that whatever it takes, we are going to see to the formation of this the commission, which, if like you said, from the 8th Assembly to the 9th Assembly, and eventually the two chamber have decided that, look, they have passed it, and we hope the president will sign it, because he raised 3 observations, and which all the 3 observations have been tackled. Maybe as time goes on, I will tell you all 3 observations he raised, and then the way we handle it.
All right, we're going to remain with you for now as the sponsor of this very important bill. You cited South Korea and Singapore, which of course have shown good examples of countries that have been able to manage the transportation system and that it's yielding a lot of dividends. Back here in Nigeria, it's going to be a new introduction when it comes to the transport sector, because of course, you know, transport system in Nigeria is quite huge. It is a place where all comers are involved in the transport business, individuals and corporate bodies and what have you. Does this bill have a vision on how all these individuals and corporate bodies who are already in transport business, how will they be properly coordinated? Will this bill not put some of them out of business, because some of them rely on that for their livelihood?
No. If you look at the last part of the bill, the intention was to coordinate. When you are coordinating, you take everybody along. I remember when we were doing the public hearing, we called all the different sectors. Everybody was there to give their own contribution. There's no way you want to eliminate other sector, because the first intention is that you want to generate revenue for the country, which is the factor, and to help the economy. That is the reason why we agree with the president when he said, or their team, when they said they are not ready to form a new commission, but they want the Shippers Council to act temporarily, and let's see how it goes. And then we believe the expertise in the Shippers Council will be able to harness the aviation industry, the seaport, the MPA, the land transport. You said something that is very germane. Even the land transport in Nigeria, they are not coordinated. But if you are able to bring them together under one umbrella, there will be a department that will be overseeing them, and then the little that will be coming from them, and then there will be what is called fair competitions among them, and it will be better for the nation. It will be better for the nation.
Wouldn't that be a duplicity of these agencies? Is that the reason why President Buhari refused to assent to the bill in 2018? I'm saying, does it amount to duplicity, you know, in these agencies, the functions of the agencies? Is that one of the reasons why President Buhari refused to assent to the bill in 2018 when it was presented to him?
No. Let me give you the 3 reasons why he said he was thinking that there's going to be a duplication. between the Minister for Transport and the Minister for Works. And the explanation at that time is because of the highway bills, that what would now happen that because the highway is under the Minister for Works. And then when you now say you are forming a commission, it will not affect the Minister of Works. We now explain in the new bill that the ministry used to be Ministry for Works and Transportation. At that time, there was only one minister. But even now that the ministry has been split, there is an advantage to it in the sense that the Highway Act, is still in the Ministry of Works. So it has nothing to do with the Minister of Transportation. We have explained that, and then they agree. Secondly, the president was looking at the cost of forming a new bill. And that was why they now suggest, because initial bill was that we should have a new commission entirely. But in the president's suggestion that we can allow Shippers Council to act as interim, which the Senate now agree with their observation that, fair enough, they have the manpower, they have the capacity, let them start it, and let's see how it goes, and then we'll be able to take it from there. And lastly, one of the reasons why he raised an observation again is that we said that the revenue is going to be high, more than what we are presently getting. We were able to prove that if it's properly annexed, all other sectors that they have this department in their agency will be properly coordinated, and then the money will be high. There's no responsibility. They are not taking responsibility at that time. It's whatever they declare or whatever they say they have. But with the new commission, just like all of us, what we witnessed in PENCOM or even NEPA, when they form the commission, you can now see the difference in revenue generation. And we need it. We need a revenue, sincerely, because like I said earlier, the oil is now going out of fashion. So we need to look inward to boost our economy.
So, thank you. When you talk about generating revenue, those in the transport sector will tell you that those that have been paying their taxes and what have you to government. But we understand clearly, what you are talking about in terms of coordination. We want a better coordinated transportation system that can yield dividends and also help those who are in that business to also prosper as Nigerians. Thank you. We will come back to you much later in the course of the conversation. We are still trying to connect with Bello Haliru Gwandu, who is the Assistant Legal Advisor, Nigerian Shippers Council. Since you have said that you have agreed that Shippers Council should, in the interim, stand as a commission. All right, so we'll have better understanding of this as the conversation goes on. Now, let's bring in Mani Ochuboju, who is a lawyer and a transport consultant. Mani, the bill actually seeks to establish National Transport Commission, designed to be an independent regulatory authority in the transport sector. For you, who's a consultant, what is likely going to be the core function of this commission?
Kingsley,
Kirian, rather.
Kirian. My apologies, Kirian. The core functions, as the bill proposes, is to be an independent body that will ensure the promotion of economic policies as regards transport, the national policies as regards transport, to seek a framework whereby transport agencies will be registered or deregistered, to set up a monitoring framework whereby those who comply or don't comply will be sanctioned. There is enforcement capacity in the regulatory body. The challenges setting up an independent regulatory body poses in Nigeria, it's general in the sense that regulations are things that have a lot of inefficiencies in it in Nigeria. The environment in Nigeria is such that independence sometimes is considered as being either anti-government or act of insubordination. And the way they act is such that it will have an interface with the functions of the Minister for Transport, because even the Minister for Transport is advised within the framework to ensure the independence of the Commission. The Commission has wide powers over monitoring road transportation, rail transportation, water transportation, port facilities, and other designated and related facilities within the transport industry. The functions of the Commission are extremely wide. It is a large chunk of the functions that the Ministry of Transport performs right now. And it is a very good idea. It is brilliant. But for me, I think it is aspirational. It is a good aspiration. The political and regulatory environment for it, is it right? I'm not very optimistic. But if it will bring revenue, fine. The purpose of regulation should not be revenue generation. It should be ensuring there should be better competition, access to services, a level playing field for everybody in the industry, and to allow an even-handed dealings of the operators and even those that use the services, and to create room for dispute resolution and stuff like that. So regulation should be more of ensuring an enabling environment for the economy to thrive, for the aspects of the industry to develop, instead of just taxing people, fining people, because there are some very draconian aspects of that of the bill, whereby if you infringe, they fine you 500,000. In some cases, 500,000 and 1 year imprisonment as a first offender. In other cases, as a second offender, 500,000 and 3 years imprisonment. These are aspects of the bill we also have to look at. The bill is not so user-friendly per se. Oh yes, it has some very, very threatening aspects to it, even threatens the authority of the Minister for Transport. And I find it very interesting how the bill will say the minister must ensure the independence of the Commission. The minister, before he makes any policy on transport, must communicate with them in writing. We saw the other day when the minister decided the railway Abuja to Kaduna, 100% increase in prices, and he can't do that with this commission.
Is there a way of trying to take politics out of the commission itself?
It is very difficult, absolutely difficult, because the reason why we are still here, 12 years down the line of the conception of this idea is politics. Because Port Authority is an authority in its own right. They manage themselves. Nigerian Railway is an authority, a regulatory body, even though it is defective, but it's still a regulatory body. They regulate themselves. And then you are bringing a commission that will regulate ports, that will regulate NIMASA, that will regulate Nigerian Railway, all of that, and that will regulate even the Minister for Transport. Oh yes, Minister for Transport will be regulated by these new rules, because there are many things that the minister has to do by consulting with them. If you don't consult with them, they can even issue an order against the minister. Oh yes, anybody. In fact, the decree says, sorry, well, it sounds like a decree. The bill says the commission can issue an order against anybody, which I'm afraid includes the president himself too. They can, oh yes, they can issue an order that his transport policy, maybe that has to do with his convoy or other businesses, violates the commission's policies. Anybody, no exception. So imagine commission issuing order against Amechi, respectfully, Minister Amechi. I mean, it will be really interesting. We look forward to see how it will operate.
Yes, it will be quite interesting.
Yes, it will be.
Yes. Coming to you now, are you optimistic about this bill?
Yeah, I'm very optimistic, and I just want to address certain aspects of it to respond to some of his concerns and fears. First of all, let's try to understand. I was going to start with a sort of a historical context, but let me just start from what the point he has made. Now, the effective management of any sector requires delineation of roles and responsibilities. Yes. In developed societies, that's how institutions evolve. Now, what do I mean? Delineation of roles, policy, asset management, asset ownership, asset management and operation, and regulation. Now, even within regulation, the scope of regulation covers economic regulation, technical regulation, safety regulation, and environmental regulation. Within the scope of the National Transport Commission, we are only dealing with economic regulation. And why is it important we deal with economic regulation? When you want to open up a sector for private investments, so when we talk, I think the wrong phrase is to say revenue. Rather, it is to open up a sector for private investment.
And get revenue from that.
No. Wait, you know, it's not, when you talk about revenue in the way they have phrased it, it's not necessarily taxing Nigerians, putting pressure, economic pressure on Nigerians. And I'll give you an example of a sector that we can all relate to. Okay, so now you almost cannot get private sector to invest in any sector without the presence of an independent economic regulator who provides market access, provides provisions for licensing, control of tariffs, and to a very large extent, customer service management. Okay, so now, I'll give you an example. Until we repealed and reenacted the Nigerian Communications Act that empowered the NCC to create the right regulatory framework for private sector investment, we will not have successfully liberalized that sector. And just look at what that sector has done to Nigerians in terms of job creation, in terms of GDP growth. For us in the Nigerian Economic Summit Group, in 2015, as part of our advocacy for this bill, we did an economic impact assessment of the bill. And we projected at the time in 2015 that if this bill comes into law as far back as that 2015, within a 5-year period, we projected it was going to create 87,000 new jobs. It was going to lead to 7% income growth for Nigerians and a 2.5 reduction in poverty. Now, these are the underlying traits or trends when you deregulate a sector, when you create a regulated sector with an economic regulator. So when you hear issue orders, it's not in the way we understand it. It's simply, the NCC issues orders to protect Nigerians in telecommunication. Without the NCC's regulations, we would have still been doing per minute billing. So it is those kind of orders to operators that we are looking at. Nobody is going to issue an order to the minister because in this context, I have talked about sector delineation, rules delineation. The responsibility of the minister on the ministry is with policy. Now, you then have the asset owners will remain. Take ports, for instance. NPA will remain the landlord of the port sector. NPA will continue to provide technical regulation for the port sector. NPA will continue to provide safety regulation for the port sector. Ditto with railway. Ditto with Federal Roads Authority when they comes on board. Ditto with inland waterways. They will still retain their powers to regulate technical, safety, and environmental. Yeah. They will. It is only in economic regulation. And why, again, do you need that? I'll just use an example as an individual. Okay. If you fly into JFK now, you go into the subway, you get into New York City, yes. You enter a cab and get to your house. You have used 3 modes of transport to get to your house: air, rail, and road. Now, the effective coordination of transport sector requires an integrated multimodal framework. And in order to deliver private sector investment in it, you need an economic regulator that can perform that function across the multimodal nature of the transport sector. You can say the same for goods. You import your goods through the ports, you put it in the rail to Kano, to an inland container depot, you use your trucks and move it to your final destination. You have also used 3 modes of transport. All of this require an integrated economic regulation framework, just so that you don't have a situation where, in executing this function I have said, you fall under the purview of economic regulation of ports, you fall into economic regulation for railway, you fall into economic regulation for roads, in trying to move your goods from the ports to your warehouse, or in trying to get to your house from the airport. And so that really is where we are looking at. It's not as draconian as people think.
If I may comment, you know, most of these bills are an adaptation of other bills that have worked in other countries, policies that have worked in other countries. Do you think if we adapt the way it's done in those countries where we got all these ideas from, will it work in this country?
Yeah, one of the things we did...
Coming from an airplane to a subway to a road.
But
can it work
yeah,
here?
but let me give you an example.
Yes.
It's working now. If right now, if you fly into Abuja airport, there's a rail line from Abuja that brings you into the central area.
I've never bothered to go to that railway. I just get a taxi and go home.
But the asset is there. It's going to function one day. Yeah. It's there. We're not ever going to take away that rail line. Yes. Now, this is where this kind of regulator comes. Why? Because the rail line is not functioning, because we are depending on government for management and operation of it. That rail line should actually be concessioned to the private sector. The Nigerian Railway Authority remains the asset owner of the rail tracks, but they can concession the management of it from the airport to the city. Then you can use it. So to that extent, yes, it can work. However, when we worked on the bill, and when I say when we did it within 8th Assembly, in fact, this bill, that's why I wanted to provide the historical context. The Nigerian Economic Summit Group and the MBA section on business law had worked with the National Assembly on this bill. And when we did that, apart from looking at global best practices, a key aspect of the work we did is adaptation to the Nigerian environment. So you pick examples from Canada, Australia, Kenya, Tanzania, South Africa, Singapore, all of those countries, and then you still will have to adapt it to the Nigerian, what this particular bill has done. So it is not a copy and paste from any country, but then again, you really have to realize that you operate in a global village. You want to begin to attract investments from an international market. So you have to align your legislation. Because when an investor wants to come, the first thing he asks for is the law guiding that sector. If the law guiding that sector is not investor friendly, he gets out. And then who loses? Some of us believe very strongly that the day we allow private sector investment in rail, for instance, we will have a more efficient rail sector.
Yes, well, it's well said and well explained. But the point is, as Jumai pointed out a short while ago, is the possibility of ensuring implementation that will yield the dividends that you are talking about. In Nigeria, land transport is almost about 90% of transport of our transport system. Right, and creating a framework, that will bring in the private sector in it may not be understandable to an ordinary Nigerian. If you're talking about railway, we're just beginning. It's just beginning, and we have not even had a good network of railway well functional at the moment as to begin to attract the private sector in it. Because of course, it's a hardcore transport system that requires a lot of money, to put the rail tracks and all of that in place before a private sector will come in. I'm just raising these issues because we're going to return to you very soon for further explanations on this particular one. But for now, let's go to Bello Haliru Gwandu, Assistant Legal Advisor, Nigerian Shippers Council. He's reaching us via Zoom from Lagos. Good morning, Bello Haliru Gwandu. Good morning. Good to see you on Good Morning Nigeria today.
Hello, good morning, sir.
Audio is quite clear, and for you to do an opening comment, let's hear from you, because from what is on the ground at the moment, Shippers Council is going to really take the position of the commissioner we are talking about, and we learned that you have the capacity and the capability, to be the interim commission, as it were. So lead us into other things that about this commission and how Shippers Council intends, to, of course, kick the ground, kickstart, the process.
Hello? I don't know if you can hear me, but I didn't get your question.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, it's
Can you hear me? Can you hear me now?
Interruptions, the network.
There is interruption at the moment, so do we have to work on your line before we return to you?
Hello, can you hear me now?
We can hear you clearly, right? And our concern is whether you are hearing me or not. Because if you can't hear me, it's needless asking the question. If you can hear me now, then you let me know so I can now ask the question.
Okay, I can hear you now.
All right. We have been told that based on the framework already put in place with respect to this commission, the Transport Commission bill that has now been passed by the two chambers of the National Assembly, that the Shippers Council is going to be the, in the interim, stand by for the commission in the interim, which is to say that the Shippers Council will have to implement, the bill, as it were, when it's time for to do that. So we want to understand whether you have the capacity and capability to stand in for the commission for now, as an interim commission, so to speak.
Thank you very much for your question. So I'm having an issue with my internet. If you can hear me, I'll proceed. If I get your question, you're talking about the role of the Shippers Council when the bill is assented into law, and whether it has the capacity or not to implement the provisions of the bill.
Yes.
Yes.
Is that your question?
Exactly.
Okay. You see, let me give a little background on why Shippers Council was selected to form the initial staffing. Prior to the concession of the seaport terminal operators, the Bureau in 2007, the Bureau of Public Enterprise, through the National Council on Privatization, initiated reform in the transport sector by drafting and submitting to the Federal Executive Council 6 bills under the then Federal Ministry of Transportation and Works. The bills are Port and Harbors Authority Bill, Railway Bill, Waterways Bill, Roads Authority Bill, Roads Fund Bill, and the National Transport Commission Bill. The first 5 I mentioned are subsector legislations that are to derive that the NTC is to supersede. So it's not a one process focused only on the national transport quotation. It revolves around reform in the transportation sector. After the privatization, there's no economic regulator in the sector. NPA became the landlord, which is the owner of the ports that were concessioned to private entities. So you need an arbiter. Hence, why the issue of National Transport Commission came into being. And sensing that you need to have a regulator for each sector, why not have one regulator that will be multimodal in its regulatory control of the various subsectors under the transportation sector? Now, because of the need for a specialized agency to perform that role, Shippers Council was in 2015 appointed via the presidential order gazetted to be the interim economic regulator for the ports, pending passage of a legislation by the National Assembly that will provide economic regulatory framework for the transportation sector. So it wasn't a day's decision or just a decision of the National Assembly. It was as a result of a policy of the federal government approved by the Federal Executive Council. Hence, the appointment by a presidential order, and then regulation was subsequently issued portion to the presidential order in 2015. Both the orders and regulations were gazetted, and Shippers Council started making preparations towards that by carrying out intensive and extensive regulatory reform in the sector, training of staff in the areas of economic regulations of the port sector, And when the bill was presented in 2015, that was what the National Assembly considered. That, look, instead of establishing a whole new agency, there is already an existing agency performing similar role that was appointed by the federal government to do so. And it has accompanying assets and resources. You don't need to establish a whole new agency. You have to look for budget for its takeoff. You have to look for office accommodation. You have to recruit from the scratch. But there is an existing agency performing similar role. Why not adapt it to become an interim regulator so that if the bill is passed, it will now step into the shoes of the economic regulator and build capacity by looking into the various subsectors it is seeking to regulate. So it's not going to be just Shippers Council that will be part of it, but you need a foundation. If we go back in time, the defunct technical department of the defunct NEPA was adopted to become the foundation for the National Electricity Regulatory Commission. PENCOM was the pensions office of the under the office of the head of service.
All right, we seem to have glitches, along the line of communication with Bello Haliru Gwandu via Zoom. So we're going to return to him to conclude his opening salvo. For now, well, he's back. Okay, let's hear from him.
Hello, sir. Am I still?
Go ahead, please. Yeah, Haliru, if you can hear me, you can go ahead and complete your explanation.
Okay, the Joint Maritime Labour Industrial Council and the National Maritime Authority were adopted to become what is now known today as the Nigerian Maritime Authority and Safety Agency. NIWA was a department under the Federal Ministry of Transportation that was empowered to implement the NIWA Act, and all these agencies build capacity along the way. The same with National Communications Commission. So why not the Nigerian Shippers Council? It has accompanying structures, office buildings. It has a budgetary allocation for it to commence the implementation. You don't need to go to the National Assembly or the federal government to set aside other sums for its takeoff.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. I'm sure that all of the guests listens to you to have a better understanding of the Shippers Council, status in this very framework, and that if I understand you clearly, you are talking about your capacity to do this, because of course that's what you have been doing before the advent of this commission we're talking about. And let us bring in again the sponsor of this bill, who has also listened to you. He's in Lagos. In Ibadan, rather. Let's go to the sponsor of the bill. So you listened to Haliru of the Shippers Council and the background, history that he gave us with respect to how Shippers Council, came on board on the issue of, being the interim regulator. Now, what is your take on that?
Well, I said it earlier on that when we were doing this bill, there was a public hearing where NPA, all agency, they attended and they made their submission. And that was one of the few things we used in forming our report and taking it back to the Senate. Like he said, it was even observed by the president, because the National Assembly initially, we were looking for a new and neutral commission. But the presidency now suggested that, look, let's use the Shippers Council in their observation, which we agreed entirely, so that at least the building, the manpower, every other thing, because it's the economic regulatory aspect of it that they are going to do for the nation. The safety and all other things are with the same agency as it were. Now, the first speaker raised a very vital question, that 500 fine or 3 months in prison in the bill. Yes, it was for a railway bill. It has nothing to do with the NTC bill. It was the railway bill that was saying that if the driver drinks, he should be fined 500,000 on 3 months in prison. And it has to be ash like that because people's life are in his hand. Why should you drink when you are going to take only how many coaches in the passengers in the train? And then the second aspect is that if anybody obstruct the train while in motion, people's life are in danger. We know the way we are in this country. You must make things a bit harsh so that people will say, hey, there is punishment. And if there is implementation after you commit that offense, people will stay clear. Coming back to the second speaker, his example is very, very germane. Look at in 1999, 2000, when the country was planning to have MTN, which was already all over the West African country at that time. And then at the time they started, there was no NCC. They were just doing whatever they like. But immediately the NCC came on board, you can see the competition. I remember very well when MTN started, you buy your car, within 2 seconds it's gone. But now, even now, there are still some small problem, but you can see that there is a lot of improvement in the services of the communication. And it has nothing to do with the minister. And then now, my first speaker said another thing again about Honorable Minister Amici. We are not looking at individual. Just like me and him, we won't be there forever. We are looking at the nation. So the law is not meant for a particular minister. It's meant for that ministry. The best practice for the country, the way it is done in other countries. And we are not, like we said, the aspect of the NTC is the economic regulator, which during the public hearing, all interests, they came. Some of them have their fear. And it's like any other bill or any act. There is merit and demerit of the bills, no doubt about that. But at any point in time, as a legislature, as a National Assembly as a whole, you take the advantages. The moment the merit is more than the merit, and the benefit to the population or to the masses is higher, you pick it up to help the economy. No bill or no any policy that you bring into this world that will not have its own demerit. But the one thing is that we can improve on those disadvantages to help the advantages in so far that is going to help our economy. So it's not about the about individual or about the policy. And then the NTC again, I repeat, are not taking over the safety, the administration of other people. All of them were at the public hearing to submit and make their own contribution, which form what we did at the National Assembly before the two chamber passed the bill. And we hope it will be assented to by the President.
Abdul Fattah Buhari will get back to you in the course of the discussion. Back here in the studio, Mr. Nana Ude, you wanted to respond to some of the things they said earlier.
Oh, no, actually, I wanted to respond to the point he made about the rail sector, where we are with the rail industry and with the rail sector. The point is this. It's not, he alluded to the fact that it's still a nascent sector, and it's not so. I mean, the Eastern and Western line, the narrow gauge lines, have been there. They were done by the the British colonial administration. The Eastern line was conceived in 1913, for instance, the Port Harcourt to Maiduguri line, and the narrow gauge was built. The Western line, Lagos to Kano, it has been there. But the problem, as we will all agree, is that over time, the rail sector deteriorated, and the rail was no longer an effective means of transportation. I remember my father, my parents, the older would tell us how they used to ride the trains to go to school and all that. So the question is, what has happened? But even this particular administration and the one before it have made a lot of investments in the rail sector. The Central Line, the Warri-Tape, Ajaokuta line. There's currently the standard gauge going on from Lagos to Ibadan. There was at the beginning of the administration, they talked about the Port Harcourt to Calabar. So there are investments going on. Then not talk of Abuja, Kaduna,
The investment on there, can it begin to attract private investment?
Yes, the answer to that is yes. If we can accept that management and operations should be left to the private sector, because you can't get any private investors to start laying tracks. The government will still have to make the investment in the infrastructure. But in management and operation, and I will always say this, take the Abuja, the last time I tried to use the Abuja Kaduna, you cannot use that train system unless you get there, you buy your ticket with a long queue. But all of us know that you can do electronic ticketing, you can buy a ticket 7 days in advance of your trip. So
in other climes.
In other climes. And this is what the private sector, innovation private sector can introduce. And for you to achieve that, for you to really encourage private investments in any sector, like I said, the first condition is an independent regulator. Independent, effective regulator. Because we have some sectors where you have regulators that are ineffective and they have not been able to do that. So that's the point. Independence, effectiveness. And that is what this bill seeks to achieve. And so that's why, for us in the National Assembly Business Environment Roundtable, which is NESG and NBA section on business law, it is one of what we call our priority legislations, because we see what it can do. And then just to go back a bit, at the onset of the discussion around this transport sector reform bills, that was about 1999-2000, 3 sectors of the economy were identified as having the potential to unlock the economy. Telecommunications, power, and transport. And then reforms were proposed to these sectors to enable the private sector invest in them. We concluded telecom with what you heard about the Nigerian Telecommunications Act. We started off with power. That was what created the NERC, and that goes to the point I was making about an ineffective regulator. And then we are now trying to get the transport sector reform, tractor sector reform bills. And like Bello said, it is not just the NTC. These reform bills include the railway bill, the federal roads bill, the inland waterways bill, the ports and harbor bill. So hopefully when we are done with this particular one, then, because again, another point that needs to be made is that to a very large extent, the NTC will rely on these subsector legislations, because in economic regulation of these subsectors, you will have the core of the regulatory work actually is embedded in the subsector legislations. So, and that's why it's not just going to be a standalone legislation. We'll get it in, but we still need to repeal and reenact these other legislations. And they're already in the senator just referred to the railway bill, trying to correct him. So these ones are also there, and we are also encouraging the National Assembly to, as soon as possible, to pass them into law.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Well, better explain now. I made mention of something earlier on, and that has to do with the fact that over 90% of the transport system should be land, if I'm right. And I wonder how that is, incorporated, in this bill. State and local government are essentially in charge of urban transport, for instance. And there's no saying the fact that the sector has been weakly regulated. Yes, we agree with that. And Lagos is a typical example of this, where you have more commuters than, of course, the vehicles that will have to convert them from one point to the other. So I want to understand how this bill has, incorporated or taken care of this aspect. Another one I want to raise, and I'd like Chubo to come in here, is that in other climes, National Transport Commission provides quality and national transport reform proposals to government. Correct. Now, are the reforms being proposed by this bill is this strategically designed to improve transport productivity, having in mind that, as I said earlier, that many Nigerians are involved in the transport system, especially land. Very many are involved, both private individuals and, of course, corporate bodies who have all these companies who ply all the federal highways across the nation.
Yes. Kieran, yes, the answer is yes. This bill will definitely stimulate productivity, without doubt. It will also stimulate competition, without doubt. Some of my critical comments on the bill, it goes to reflect that there are also some disadvantages. As the senator says, every bill has its own pros and cons. And it is fine that my friend is promoting the cons very well, the pros very well. But I'm being a little bit critical, partly because of my experience with regulation, particularly in Nigeria and in third world. You have regulatory capture. You have lack of capacity. You have lack of resources, lack of finance, lack of independence. Those are critical issues regarding the inefficiency of regulation across the board, particularly in Nigeria. It's all well and good for us to use NCC as one Hail Mary story to clap. But even then, it's only on, what do you call it, mobile phone. Do we have landlines? The structures are dead and buried. So if NCC is there beating its chest, let NCC know they ain't started nothing yet. Why you don't have landlines? Okay, NEC, you mentioned NEC in passing. Yes, I'm critical about NEC. The lights may go off any minute from now. NEC, on paper, is brilliant, yeah? Independent, they arbitrate or mediate between government, private sector investors, and users. All of that is brilliant. But then, how independent are they? How efficient are they? Have we have the so-called successes of NCC as regards power, the deregulation of the economy, the introduction of competition and privatization? What successes have we had? I'm sorry to say, it's been zilch. Fine. What do you call it? National Shippers Council. They have these very aspirational ideals about bringing ideas that are fine. Yes, they work in other climes, but the structures in other climes are working. It's all well and good to tell me about aeroplane, underground, and all of that. Yeah, they work, but we don't have those structures. We don't have rails that work. We don't have waterways that work. We don't have, well, airports are beginning to work, so I'll give that to airport, a little bit of them.
That's for the elites, for the common man.
Fair enough. They are not even involved in this commission. By the way, they are not.
Because
they are not.
It has an international regulation.
The economic regulation of the aviation industry is captured in the bill. But the
point, fine.
But the point is that I agree with him in the sense that I don't know of any country that drafts a bill to solve all problems. That's one. I don't know of any country where institutions work perfectly 100%. Institution building takes a lot of time. You learn as you go. Yes, are there demerits in the bill? Of course there are. Good, yes. Are there sectors that have a regulator that are not working? Of course there are. Should we change the focus of regulation in Nigeria, like he said, away from revenue? Because people like us actually believe that we need to emphasize the point that regulation is not about revenue generation.
Thank you.
I agree with that. I agree with that.
But the point however, the point the senator made actually points to the fact that it is to get the revenue for the government.
Correct.
Because it is stated very clearly that this regulation is an economic regulation.
Yes.
And it is meant to put money in the pocket of government.
Yeah.
There are no two ways about what has been explained on that, even in the bill itself. Let me give you a background. And when Chobok what he was talking about is quite apt, in the sense that when you are talking about regulation, you mentioned NCC, fine and good, but we don't have landlines in this country. America and many other nations who selected the mobile phone decades ago, they don't have landlines.
Yeah.
So what has NCC achieved in terms of regulation, if we're talking about, if we're citing NCC as an example? I'm not saying they've not done a good job, right? But, we are here in Nigeria. You are now bringing in a bill that will introduce a commission to regulate the transportation system in the country. And we're already seeing that there are, like Ochubog mentioned, that there are some areas that have not been properly captured or taken care of to ensure that this very regulatory arrangement we're trying to put in place is going to work.
Okay, Mr. Mani, can you land on what you were saying earlier?
Fine. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to land. Look, National Shippers Council introduced this brilliant idea of dry ports. They are excellent ideas on paper, yeah? But the material condition for them, the economic forces and structures are not there to support it. You go and plant, dry ports here and there, in Kaduna, in Kano, in Maiduguri, in Jos, in Ibadan, you name it, 6. You don't have rails to back it up. You don't have effective intermodal transport, which my friend here is referring to. Excellent. we need to first work on the structures. Yes, it's fine. It is right for us to have the regulatory framework in place. I don't mind the aspiration, but we don't have to forget that we don't have the structures in place to drive it. It will be inefficient. Yes, it's fine. We can't have one silver bullet for all of these transport problems. I agreed. And I agree that we should have the commission, yes. But we should not be blindsided. We should not look at the fact that there are still a lot of regulatory and structural inefficiencies. In fact, structural deformities in place that we need to deal with at the same time. So it's not, you just bring the commission, it's not an abracadabra. You just put up the commission and suddenly all our transport problems are solved. Road transportation, 90%. Local governments regulate it. State governments regulate it. Individuals regulate it. You sit down in a PAPA, National Shippers Council. How will you go to Maiduguri inside near Bagadia and be dealing with those people, dealing with their own modes of transportation and regulating them and registering them, deregistering them? Really? Can you? The answer is no, you cannot. Fine, you will build these institutions. I agree. You build institutions. But we still have problems with having big men in Nigeria. Institutions versus big men in Nigeria. We have all these problems where tomorrow you go and touch one big transport line, it's a problem. Lastly, before my friend comes in or anybody comes in, we are going to deal with competition. Yes. We are going to introduce competition, yes. But we have the monstrosity of Nigerian Railway Corporation as a monopoly. How you introducing competition there is still a big, big problem that will take decades. And we wish it will happen overnight. We really wish.
Yes. Mr. Ude, how can the subnationals now key into this bill?
Okay, sorry, I will answer that. But the point is this. I think we are misunderstanding, or we are trying to misunderstand the basic tenets of what the bill seeks to achieve. All the problems that he has listed, we are all Nigerians, we admit that they're there. Nobody is saying that a single stroke of the pen will sign it off all the way. So yes, I mean, we live here. We don't live in another world. But how do we begin to address those problems? It is through policies, it is through legislations. And why we always advocate for legislation is that it is easier when you break the law, you become a criminal. So that's why you need to embed some of those corrections in a law. So even if you are not, we have seen people charged to court for offenses they committed 10 years ago because it's in the law. And so that's why we advocate for us to begin to use the legislative framework to reorder the way we are organized as a country. So yes, all of these problems he's talked about are issues that ultimately we hope that as we grow as a day, and as all of us, because the aspect he's talking about, let's call it by its name, is the political will to enforce. That's it. Okay. The institutional reform you need to talk about.
The political will to
enforce? It is us as Nigerians that will create it. Okay. We will need to put in place leaders that will have that political will to enforce. It will not drop from the sky. Nigerians will demand it, push it, go for it, deliver it, and it will happen. Okay. And that's the point. So, sorry, then, I started by talking about the delineation of rules. The role of the ministry in terms of policy design and implementation, the role of a regulator, the role of the asset owner, the role of the management and operations. And then regulation. We are just dealing with regulation. We are now talking about just a subset of regulation, which is economic regulation. What we need, and I agree with you, is structural reform of each of these responsibilities and roles. The ministries we should also advocate that the ministries are up in doing their work, that the asset owners, whether it is NPA or FRA when they come, or NRA that the bill tries to create, currently NRC, because to talk about what you said about NRC being a monopoly, one of the provisions of both this legislation and the railway bill that we're talking about is to allow private operators in the rail industry, in the rail sector. NRA will also have an operating license, but then you will be able to have other private operators to run those lines. And so we need to start from somewhere. We need to have the will to say enough is enough. We should make our bills work. we should make our policies work and go for it. That's my take.
Well said. It's really interesting that we're also addressing the demerits of this very bill, because it is not enough to just float a bill or have a commission for the purposes of regulating a transport system, and along the line you don't have the structures to drive the regulatory work that the commission intends to do. Well, that's why this conversation has really touched on a very, very pertinent aspect of the bill. Now, let's return to Bello Haliru Gwandu, Assistant Legal Advisor, Nigerian Shippers Council.
A break now.
But okay, right, before we go to Haliru, let's take a break, because I wanted him to come in and make some comments based on Mr. Ochuboju's contribution. Let's take a short break now. When we come back, we'll get to him for the conversation to continue. All right, thank you for staying with us up to this moment on Good Morning Nigeria for today. Now, let's go back to Bello Haliru Gwandu. Bello, the new bill appears to be all-encompassing, as it takes into consideration all regulated services and related transport services and facilities, including ports, inland waterways, all forms of land transport, as well as the railway services. Now, give us a clue of how the Shippers Council intends to, do this regulatory work, assuming you're asked to take off, because of course from all you have said, you are not new when it comes to the regulation of the transport system. You're not new, and the background scenario you give to us indicates clearly that you are in the know and you have the capacity to carry out such function.
Thank you very much. Just like Nana mentioned, and as I mentioned also earlier, these transport sector reform bills are a pack of 6. And the NTC is not going to design rules, regulations, or guidelines for enforcement in the sector. No. The subsector legislation have provided for regulations and guidelines that will be developed by the subsector agencies in the industry that will now present those regulations, guidelines, and rules to the Commission for its approval. Now, when the NTC approves those regulations, when they conform with international best practice and standard, the NTC will now approve them and ask them, okay, to go and implement in line with the rules and in accordance with international best practice. Now, the NTC will be supervising the implementation of those rules and regulations within the sector. So it's not for NTC to just draft rules and regulations and bring it. No, it is a consultative process that will involve the asset owners, the stakeholders, that is the regulated services users and providers, that is the shipping companies, terminal operators, freight forwarders. They all have an input in the regulations or guidelines to be developed, then which will not be implemented. So it is not to be embedded in the NTC regulations or guidelines. No.
Yeah, we seem to have lost him there on the Zoom network. We'll come back now to the studio. Mr. Mani, this commission is looking at, addressing this transport sector. Who do you think will run this commission if it's established? Will it be technocrats or politicians?
Ordinarily speaking, they should be technocrats. Properly speaking, should be technocrats, independent-minded, well-grounded professionals like my brother here. But regrettably, those who run it will be politicians or connected with politicians, or have some godfathers or one emir or one oba somewhere pushing their career from the back, who will run it, regrettably. I had a close-up view of NEC at one point under, I will say his name, Amadi he was reasonably skilled and very clear-headed about the role of a regulator. And I admired him, but there were constraints, political constraints. And he had around him professional commissioners who were very, very good in the power industry. Some of them were headhunted from overseas. And this young professional technocrat could not really function because of the environment and the vested interests and other cabals in the industry who were still interested in doing things as they used to do, you know, that profited from us having power outages and blackouts and inefficient regulatory structures. That is some of the problems we may have with the transport. I know we should have it. As my friend said, it is right that we should try to build capacity. It is right that we should try to build our institutions. It is right that we must say enough is enough. But let us also sound the alarm right now that National Transport Commission should not be hijacked. It should not be hamstrung. It should not be embedded in political environment where it can't function. And it will just be another institution, another commission that is there with brilliant laws, and they can't back. They can't even bite. So you're just there. You have to be good to the minister. You have to be good to the president. You have to be good. You are not independent. Those are issues we have to deal with. The independence, the institutional capacity, and the will to enforce those rules. Those are issues we have to start declaring them now. So it's not just enough for us to have a beautiful NTC Commission bill. We have those bills. We have them. But have they engineered productivity, as Kirian mentioned? Have they brought about competition, as Kirian mentioned? Have they brought about even private sector investment? Even private sector investment. The private sector investment we've been hearing about since the days of privatization in Nigeria is still limited. It's still very, very limited. And for all you may want to say, private sector is great, yes, but they too have their own...
Exactly.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you, Manny. Before you come in, please, we'd like to return to Ibadan, where we have the senator who actually sponsored this bill, Senator Abdul Fatai Buhari. So we're coming back to you. Now, it is one thing, really, to have a transport system that supports business, and it's entirely another kettle of fish to also have an efficient and integrated transport system that supports advancement of economic development. You have said it very clearly that government should be getting revenue from the nation's transport system. You cited South Korea and one of the Asian tigers as well as countries where a good and well-integrated transport system has contributed immensely to the nation's GDP. Now, are you perceiving this bill as an instrument that can elevate transportation system in Nigeria, make it more efficient, make it more affordable, so that Nigerians can move freely their goods and services across the nation?
Let me start by saying this. I appreciate the fear of barista, but we need to reorientate ourselves in this country. It's not just because it's not working well yesterday, so we should fold our arms. That simple example, if you say you lost your friend because he sleep, and then the following day you will decide not to sleep, it's not possible. We need to start. Take, for example, I remember very well when we were doing the pilot case of Abuja to Kaduna Rail. For more than 2 months, nobody was entering the train. They would say, that thing will stop. But now, if you go to the train station, you will even get the ticket. The pilot case and the second case, Ibadan, to Lagos to Ibadan, if not because of the COVID-19, probably it will have been in operation now. Just about 2 weeks ago, Itakpe to Warri has been commissioned. Let's see that because it didn't work yesterday, it won't work today. Let's put our effort. This is our country. I absolutely agree that, look, let the technocrat, the expertise, Let them take over. Let them do it. Let's love this, our country. The bill, like I said earlier on, definitely like any other policy, advantages and disadvantages, merit and demerit. But you have to use the disadvantages to help the advantages. If you decide to be looking at the disadvantages alone, we won't move, we won't walk. Today, arguably, Kaduna to Abuja, Abuja to Kaduna rail system is one of the best modes of transport. Everybody rushed to go there. Even all the politicians, you see them parking their cars at the train station and joining the train to go. But initially, they were afraid. Initially, it was not working. But as time goes on, it will work. Like we said, the economic regulatory is what the Shippers Council is going to do. If it's done very well and it's really announced very well, and then they are sincere about it, we'll be able to see improvement within the shortest time. Because the truth of the matter is that give them the opportunity. The infrastructures are not there. They can get the money from there to build the infrastructure. To build the infrastructure. That's why we say when you put the right people and the right person in that place, they will be able to excel and it will be better for this country, I think.
Okay, Senator, thank you so much. We'll now go to our Zoom network where Bello Gwandu is waiting. Would like, since you're leaving soon, would like to have your closing comment on how this bill can benefit Nigeria and the transport sector.
Thank you very much. Now, I just want to correct a misconception about the dry port, as said by the first speaker. You see, Kaduna Inland
seem to have lost.
Well, we're still having a difficulty, linking Bello Hariru via Zoom.
He's back.
But Len, he's back right now. Let's return to him.
Okay.
Hello, can you hear me?
Let's get your response. We seem to have been having some glitches on that Zoom network. Let's come back to Mr. Ude. Yes.
Yeah, that's NCC right there for you. The internets are not working, and you are here praising NCC.
Zoom is a new platform now that people are using.
Okay. I just wanted to piggyback on one of the points he made when he said we need to start sounding the alarm bell. And I just wanted to add, not just sounding the alarm bell now, but continue to sound the alarm bell.
Thank you.
I mean, that I believe the purpose of programs like this and the purpose for which people like us are around the sector and the institutions like the NESG is to continue to serve as a watchdog and raise an alarm when things are not going on well, as we should do as citizens, as groups, and as associations. Yeah, we all agree that things are not working the way they should. We shouldn't keep quiet. And we should. The point you made, yes, if you look at the tenets of the bill, it's clear about who should be made a commissioner, the qualifications. So it addresses all that. We then have to insist, because take the NERC, for instance. I mean, I don't know whether we don't want to talk about it. Right now, the commissioners in NERC do not meet the requirements for the law that set it up.
Correct.
Right now.
Yes.
The law that set up NERC is clear on the qualifications of those who should be commissioners.
Correct.
None of them meets it as we speak. And then you wonder why the sector is comatose. So
what is the guarantee that this bill will
that's the point he made about raising the alarm bell, continue to scream, continue to say, yes, it's one thing to have a bill in place, then it's another to make sure it is implemented effectively, and then that the institution that is created out of that bill continues to function efficiently in the way it is envisaged. If you don't do that, the bill will just be what it is. It will be paper. The institution will just be what it is. It will be an NTC, and it will not deliver. So, I mean, we all agree with that. So that, I mean, I wanted us to agree on here is the need for us to have a regulatory framework for the transport sector, what the bill designs in terms of that framework, what we expect it to deliver, but it does not in any way take away the need for us to be watchdogs and faithful caretakers of that process.
Correct. All right, Manny, we're actually coming to a close, but before we do that, let's get your closing thoughts and see how we can conclude this program on a very good note, not minding the fact that we actually have touched the merits and demerits of the bill.
No, in closing,
and from what all of you have agreed is that there is a necessity for the bill. There's a need for us to have an integrated transport system in this country, and also create an enabling environment for the private sector, to come in and take over some of these transport systems, such as railway, which of course everybody really needs.
Kyrian, I agree with you and I agree with him on the need for the institutions to work. Let's build them, let them be efficient, let them induce the productivity we require, the changes and the competition we require. And let us also put in place the material structures, the intermodality we require in our transport system. Let them be properly linked, let them be properly networked. Let's fix the road, let's fix the railway. Those are key issues that we need to keep in mind. And even the waterways, let's make them work, not just have waterways of 10,000 kilometers that we don't even use at all. Those things we need to deal with, those material economic forces we need to put in place, besides having defined regulation and an institution.
Yeah, I align myself with the point he made. It's commendable that the National Assembly has passed this bill. We hope the President assents to it, and we will continue to keep our eyes on the implementation of the bill. And at any point in time that there is a deviation from the norm, we should be able to speak up and insist that the right thing be done. We need these institutions to work. We need this country to work, and we are all responsible for that to happen. Yeah.
All right, let's get back to Senator Buhari in Ibadan. Let's get to your closing thoughts on the conversation. Of course, many points have been raised, and you have also made a very, very useful contribution to this conversation. Being the sponsor of the bill, we have enjoyed your explanations, and please let's conclude the conversation. Let's hear you.
I appreciate NTA, and then I'm appealing to those people in the studio that they should form a watchdog committee from now on. Immediately the president signed the bill, so that we'll be able to start from somewhere that, look, we are interested in it. We consider all of them are professionals. So with this thing they raise, don't let the alarm stop there. Let's continue to do it, so that Shippers Council or any other person that is involved in it will stand on their toes, and will be able to achieve and move the country to where we ought to be. Thank you very much, NTA.
All right, we also would like to appreciate you for being part of the program today. Thank you very much indeed for coming and reaching us all the way from Ibadan. And that's Senator Abdul Fatai Buhari, sponsor of the bill and chairman, Senate Committee on Transport. Thank you indeed.
Thank you very much.
All right, we also like to appreciate Bello Haliru Gwandu, who is the legal advisor, Nigerian Shippers Council. Well, we've had glitches along the line. We could not, hear part of his contribution, but of course, the ones that came through were very apt. We appreciate you for coming on Good Morning Nigeria today. All right, and of course, Nana Ude, economist and Economic Summit Group, and of course, he has given us a dossier, of his appreciation of the commission, and he believes quite frankly that it's going to work for Nigeria. We all believe that, but we're all saying that we have to put everything in place, like Mani talked about the structures that can make it work. Thank you indeed for coming.
Thank you very much.
All right, and of course, Mani or Chuboju, a lawyer and a transport consultant, we appreciate your perspective to this conversation.
Thank you, Kyrian. Thank you, Jume.
All right. Stoke City, we have moved to secure the services of former Nigerian super star John Mikel Obi and former Super Falcons skipper